So I want to teach on concerning stress. There's a lot of stress in our world, a lot of stress in society, and there's no way to stop it. So we have to learn how to manage it. If you go with me to John chapter 16, this is what Jesus said about stress. The word stress in Spanish, is it the same?
Yep.
Similar?
Stress.
Okay.
Estresado.
In the Bible, if you look up the word stress in the Bible, you won't see it very often. It's not there very much. But it's hidden in the word tribulation. If you look up the word tribulation, it includes stress. So Jesus said in John 16:33, "These things I've spoken to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation. But be of good cheer, I've overcome the world." So he just treats it as normal, that there's no way to stop tribulation in the world, but in me there's peace, which is the opposite of stress. What he'd been saying in John 14, verse 27, he said, I'm leaving, but my peace I give to you, not like the world gives peace, but my peace I'll give you. So the world's idea of peace is no problems. The world's idea of peace is no wars, no conflict, no fighting between people. Jesus said, that's not what I promise. What I promise is the peace that I had in the middle of tribulation. So when he went to Nazareth and the whole church, his community, got angry with him and they tried to take him to throw him off of a cliff because of something he said. In the middle of that, he had peace. In the middle of that, he just turned around and walked away. When they said that he had a demon, he had peace. When they said he was a deceiver in his own denomination, so to speak, tried to trap him and murder him, he had peace. There's times they were going to pick up stones to throw at him, and he just walked away and didn't go in that area anymore. It wasn't because he was afraid. He had peace. So he said, my peace I give to you, not the way the world gives peace, but my peace I'll give to you. So your first reaction to trouble, your first reaction to conflict, your first reaction to being lied about or spoken against will be you. And it won't be pretty. And it won't have peace. It'll be like getting ready to fight back. But it's possible to go in Jesus' name, go inside of him as a fortress, to change the way you think, to trust the Lord, and that peace that he promised will be yours. I've had that happen many times, and it's a powerful thing, but it's not automatic. It's not the first thing that happens, it's usually the second things that happen. The first thing is you. So, Matthew chapter 24, verses 22 and 23. We have an English Bible that's easy to read, English. It's called the NIV, New International Version. And here's what Jesus taught. Now listen carefully to what he says. He's talking about the end times. From the day of Pentecost till now, it's the end times. Peter said on the day of Pentecost, Joel prophesied about the end times, and this is the beginning. This is what Joel prophesied. So the end times has been going on for 2,000 years. We are in the end of the end times. So we're going to see more stress. And stress shows up in something we call lawlessness, where people don't obey the law and they don't believe that there's any consequences. They can just do whatever they want to do, and they can take someone and rape them, they can take this man's land, they can steal, and lawlessness will increase. We're seeing it in America, it's true in Chile as well, but it's going to increase, and we hate lawlessness. But listen to what it says in Matthew 24, beginning verse 22. For there will be great distress, unequaled from the beginning of the world until now, and never to be equaled again. For if those days had not been cut short, no one would survive. But for the sake of the elect, these days will be shortened. 22 and 23. That's an amazing thing that Jesus is saying. He doesn't say it'll completely go away. He just says, it'll be so difficult, we'll shorten it. Another time he said that the stress, the tribulation, confusion is going to be so great that men will have heart attacks. Their hearts will fail them because of fear. The fear level is so high. So what Jesus does in that verse that's so powerful is he links a physical problem and an emotional problem together. That fear will kill you. Fear possibly could give you a heart attack, stop your heart from working. That's pretty amazing. Psychologists and doctors are just making those connections now for our generation, but Jesus talked about it right from the very, very beginning. In Revelation chapter 4, Jesus comes to John. John is on an island called Patmos. I've been on that island. It's not very big. It was a place where they quarried stone. It was a penal colony. The Romans would send people there to die. It's about 50 kilometers from Ephesus. And their thinking was, if we put him on this island, he won't be able to communicate with his churches. They won't be able to communicate with him. This will create a lot of stress for them and stress for him. And it was punishment from the governor. So what they didn't think about was Jesus showed up on the island when John was praying. On a Sunday morning, Jesus shows up and says, "Come up here, John. Come up here. Write down everything you see and everything you hear." And he does something that's very, very powerful. He shows John everything that's going on the earth and everything that's going to come to the earth, but he shows him everything that's going on in heaven at the same time. It's like on sometimes on sports, they'll have a split screen. You'll see two things at the same time. Split screen. Can you understand that phrase? So it's a split screen. In heaven, there's peace. In heaven, they're worshiping, they're singing, they're happy. God's with them. Angels are there. In the earth, it gets darker and darker and darker. More tribulation, and then really bad tribulation. And the worse it got in heaven, the worse it got on the earth, it just seemed like in heaven there was even more joy. So there's a throne in heaven called the throne of grace. And when you're going through a difficult time here, it's important that you go to heaven in your heart, in your mind. Yeah. You go and you stand before the throne of grace to find mercy, to find help. And you can go there anytime you want to go there. I think the Apostle Paul, when he was writing to the Colossians, he was telling them to set their affection on the things above, not on the things of the earth. If you love this world and this world system, you're in for a lot more stress. If you can say, this is not my home is in heaven, my home is wherever the Father is, I abide in him, I live in him, and you can close your eyes and just say, Lord, I worship you and I praise you, and you can get the peace of heaven now, the joy of heaven now, even though our world is in much trouble and getting darker and darker and darker. So the Christians shouldn't be the ones who are nervous and having heart attacks. We should be the ones that have peace, and our neighbors who are stressed would say, how come you're not stressed? And you can tell them about Jesus. You can tell them that your hope is in heaven. Your hope is in him. And his peace, the peace he had, is a gift to you. But there's no way to stop the stress. You have to know, you have to understand, it's going to get worse, not better. It doesn't matter who the president is. It doesn't matter what political party is in office. There's some places on the earth right now, like in China, Cuba, places in India, where the persecution and the stress it's like every day. It's their food every day. We live very peaceful lives here by comparison. But when you go there, I've been in these places, they have more peace, they have more joy. It's amazing what they have more of the glory of the Lord than what we have here. So it all works out in the end. Think about the things of heaven, not the things of the earth. That's what it says in Colossians 3, verses 1 to 4. When Paul was in prison, he was in prison at Ephesus many times. He was in prison in Rome. Somehow, I think he learned how to leave the prison in his heart with this powerful imagination, go to heaven, enjoy I don't mean physically, but in his heart and in his mind, and bow before Jesus and talk to Jesus and worship him. And he had a very real experience with that. But Paul is also human, and so he had opportunities to have stress, and he wrote about it. So in 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 1, he says there's perilous times coming, difficult times coming. One translation said there's a time that a strength-reducing time is coming. The more stress you have, the weaker you feel. And there's a strength-reducing time coming. He said, but understand this, that in the last days, perilous times of great stress and trouble that are hard to bear are coming. That sounds like bad news. That sounds negative, especially to our culture. But if you don't know it's coming and then it comes, that creates more stress. If you know it's coming and then it comes, it creates less stress. You say, oh, Jesus talked about this. He told me about this. He warned me about this. Here's an interesting verse. Go with me to Jeremiah. See if you can find Jeremiah chapter 12. This was a verse that we used during COVID. COVID was stressful. COVID, I think, was a test. We got the government telling you can't live a normal life, you can't work, go to school, can't go to church. So our church, I taught some of the best sermons I've ever taught were taught during COVID. And the Lord would wake me up in the night and show me what to teach, and I would teach it to bring peace to our people. But part of it was, this may not be the end times, but it's a practice. Let's practice and see what happens. Here's what Jeremiah said in chapter 12. Jeremiah had been complaining about the pressure from the opposition. He was having a lot of persecution, a lot of difficulties. And he says, if you've run with the footmen and they have wearied you, how will you contend with horses? And if in the land of peace in which you trusted, they wearied you, how will you run in the floodplain of the Jordan? I don't know if that means anything to you, but it's like this. If it's difficult for you to run on a flat surface, on a plain, how will you run against, if you're wearied, how will you run against horses? It's going to get worse. It's going to be more difficult. If you're having a difficult time running on a flat surface, just gravel, how will you run in the swamps? How will you run in the mud? How will you run where it's difficult? So his answer to Jeremiah is, you need to deal with this because it's not as hard as it's going to get or as hard as it could be. You need to learn how to not be weary in running now. So here's what I want you to do as disciples, and I'll try to join you in this. Everything that goes wrong, you have to take it as a test to see how well you do in tribulation. Rather than getting angry and falling apart, quitting, you have to say, wow, this is a chance to trust the Lord. This is a chance, an opportunity to grow. And stuff will happen, just life will happen. Right now they're saying that there's going to be a shortage of eggs and not enough, and they're going to be so expensive that you won't be able to get eggs in a restaurant without paying a big price. Well, bring on the eggs. There's a time coming where there won't be food. We'll have to say, I've got potatoes, you've got meat, you and I have dinner together. The more we do this, in the end time, there'll be people who say, you won't be able to buy or sell. So a church will come together and there's one person says, I've got some vegetables. Someone else says, I've got some milk. Someone else says, I've got some salt and pepper. Someone else says, I've got some meat. And we bring it together, we share together, and our love level goes higher. The higher our love level, the more the power of God comes, the more the gifts of the Spirit comes. The gifts of the Spirit work best when there's conflict. They work best when we get past our selfishness and we move to love. That's why Paul wrote 1 Corinthians 13, right in the middle of 12 and 14. That love, if we can tap into that love, the gifts of the Spirit will operate more. Right now, we're not seeing the gifts of the Spirit very much. We don't even need each other. Especially Americans, we become self-sufficient. The opposite of love is self. So we protect ourselves. I don't care about you. I want to feed my family. I don't care about you. I just want to make sure I have enough food for the future. Well, if we can get past self, which we're going to study next week, our love level will go higher and the gifts will operate more freely. So that we're multiplying loaves and fishes. We're multiplying food by the power of God because our love level has gone up. I had the president of our Bible school was from England, and he told us that one time when he was a boy, he would go down to the ocean, maybe many times, but one time he went down to the ocean and he saw the fishermen fishing. And the fishermen would reach down and take a handful of small stones, gravel, and throw it in the water, and then put in their fishing hook and pull out a fish. Reach down, take some small stones, throw it in the water, put their fish hook in and pull out a fish. And he was amazed at this. And he asked an old fisherman, why do you throw the stones in the water? And the old fisherman said, when the water is troubled, the fish really bite. Does that need translation? When the waters are troubled, when the water is doing this, when the water is doing this, nothing happens. If you get the water to be troubled, the fish bite. So for us, tribulation means evangelism. Tribulation means people will say, how come you're not destroyed by all this tribulation? How come you have peace? And we can say, it's because of Jesus. And we can catch more fish during a difficult time than during a smooth time. So for us, we should get excited. We should get happy and say, oh, it's time to fish. And we become kingdom-minded rather than selfish-minded. It sounds like I'm making it easy. It's not going to be easy. And I like peace. I like circumstantial peace. I like prosperity. But it's not what the future holds. What the future holds, everything that God does, wars, when you read in Matthew 24 and 25 about him talking about the end times, wars and rumors of war, economic difficulties, bad leaders taking over the earth. If you keep reading that, the end of it is the gospel will be preached to all nations. So everything that happens equals the gospel being preached. That's what it's all for. That's what it's about. It's not him being mean. He's not angry. He's not punishing people just for the sake of punishing them. All the stuff that's happening is to get people who haven't received Christ to open up to the reality of Christ. Amen?